position. Hold on tight. Take a deep breath.
A long haul. Today's movie is so important to me that I wanted to dedicate one whole video to it as opposed to splitting it into like 3 different parts. I guess consider this a mega review. I may do more like this in the future, but it won't be a super common thing. Anyway, as you may or may not know, I kinda sorta have a soft spot for the Jurassic Park series. When it comes to the first movie, even as a very young kid, I'll guesstimate around 6 years old, I watched it quite often. Even though my attention span couldn't keep up with all their conversations and scientific talk, Malcolm always made me laugh, and Great and Sattler were fun to have an adventure with. There are parts that certainly made me feel tense, but I was never scared of it per se. Even though folks get eaten, my super young mind just never registered that someone died. That may be because 1, the grand majority of the deaths are cleverly censored for somebody that young, and 2, I might have just been at too young of an age to even know what death was. So even though Rexy ate the lawyer in perfect view at that very young age, I didn't think he was eaten. See, because he wasn't swallowed,
pause on that, but still,
I thought he was just thrown somewhere else and he got away. He just never showed up for the rest of the movie. And by the time I learned what death was, I'd already seen the first film so many times that those death scenes didn't really faze me. It was a movie that no matter how much older I got, it was always fucking awesome.
watch your profanity.
Sorry. I'd say around high school is where I started really liking it for the more technical reasons. You know, character development, story, effects, etc. Probably like most of you, this was one of the main reasons why I like dinosaurs so much. It was a huge success when it came out, but being that I was barely a year old at the time, you can probably imagine there wasn't a very high chance of me seeing it in theaters. Not that I remember anything and my family did go see it and bring me along, but with it being such a success, 4 years later a sequel is made that, well, I never knew existed because it wasn't called Jurassic Park 2. But after finding out because of JP3 eventually existing and me using my process of elimination skills, I watched it. And this may have been either just before or just making it to teenhood when seeing it for the first time. Not that it would have mattered if I knew about it upon its theatrical release, since I don't even think I was old enough for preschool yet. I remember being excited to see Malcolm was back, but kind of upset to not see Grant. I also remember being bored for most of the beginning, wanting something to happen. And then when things did happen, I got scared beyond belief. In fact, when the T-Rex and Raptor scenes started happening, the downtime with Malcolm, Sierra, and Nick calmed me down quite a bit. Made me feel safe. When they got to San Diego, I remember thinking, yes, they're free! They're finally free! Then a boat comes crashing in, Rexy gets loose, and I'm scared again because I'm thinking, what if a T-Rex comes stomping down my street? Again, was very young, wild imagination, didn't go well when you're filled with fear all the time. 4 more years later, the 3rd movie comes out, and most of y'all should know my story about that. Made a whole review about it, even talked about it in videos that don't relate. But here are some new details. One of which being a bit of a correction. For a while, I had been saying I was 10 when I saw it for the first time. However, upon really paying attention to the timelines of me and the first 2 films' release dates, it wouldn't make sense for me to be 10 if I saw it the year it came out, which I know I did. So I must have been about 7 when I saw it for the first time. So maybe you can cut me a little bit more slack on getting scared by the Spinosaurus. Thank you. The JP3 review wasn't scripted, I just kind of guessed and then went along with it up until now. Anyway, I remember my parents and I were at another family member's house where we all saw it for the first time. So even though I was old enough to actually go to a theater, I still didn't see it. Probably because 1, I wasn't really a Jurassic Park fanatic yet, and may have been a little too intense for me, which, as most of you know, wasn't untrue. Because this was the first Jurassic Park sequel I saw, it was also the first Jurassic Park movie to actually scare me. See, this was around a time in my childhood where when movies scared me is because I always either pictured myself in that spot or thought it was real. Was also not familiar with jump scares, so when a giant reptile comes charging out of the jungle, eats someone, and you only have 2 seconds to react, yeah, it's gonna shock me. In fact, I was in tears after that moment. Ran into another room and everything to bawl my eyes out. A couple family members had to calm me down, but I eventually did and continued watching it with the rest of the family that night. Didn't necessarily make it much easier, as I was still nervous watching it the rest of the way through. You could say that this was one of the first childhood fears of mine, so to try to conquer said fear, the movie was recorded on a VHS tape, and I would watch it over and over by myself on different days until I could watch it without getting nervous. Of course, I did eventually break out of that shell of getting scared by it, and that's probably also why I rate it so high on a personal level. It was one of, if not the first fear I was able to conquer, and thankfully, it didn't take me that long to do it. Now the scarabs from the Mummy, on the other hand, was a completely different fucking story.
Watch your profanity.
Right, my bad. Even though I saw these films out of order, I eventually got to a point where I enjoyed the first and third films for how they impacted my childhood. And even though Lost World didn't affect me in any special way, I at some point enjoyed it too before I got, admittedly, maybe a little too critical and nitpicky. Nowadays, I don't hate it. It certainly has some highlights, but it lacks some of the charisma the first film had. Then, in sophomore year in high school, so 2008-2009, my curiosity started tingling. I had been on the lookout for any signs of a Jurassic Park 4 being made. There were websites you very likely won't find anymore that were dedicated to just this. There were YouTube channels made for the sole purpose of giving updates about it. It was rumored to be subtitled Extinction, implying this will be the last in the entire series. Others speculated this will involve weaponized dinosaurs. It was said to have a 2011 release date. It didn't happen. There was that rumor to come out in 2012. Didn't happen. There was that rumor to come out in 2013. Yeah, guess what? It didn't happen. At that point, I just kind of gave up on being on the lookout. But then, in 2014, a friend of mine private messages me a movie trailer that blew my freaking mind. It was amazing. New characters, crisp looking camera work, new dinosaurs. I made it an effort to see that movie opening night, which I did. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life. Finally, a Jurassic movie I was able to see in theaters, and it was a full theater at that, which made it even better of an experience. So this review is gonna kinda sorta have two sides of me. The critical side that will still wag its finger at what I thought were the bad choices, and the opening night side that was just dragged into the atmosphere and mesmerized by certain moments. Because I'm just saying, my opinion when I first saw the film is completely different from how I think about it now. Alright, this time capsule tour is over. Let's actually get into the preview stuff. Reviving a series that was already going on the decline is no easy task. Many people enjoyed Lost World, but even the more positive reviews include not being as good as the first. And then the more negative reviews can range from had potential but failed to worst movie ever made. I mean, we got worthy sequel over here, weakest in the franchise over there, this guy I think was trolling, and this one probably got chased out of town. Point being is Lost World had a lot of pressure coming off a huge success. The scale was definitely bigger, a lot more dinosaurs than before, twice the amount of adult T-Rexes, and a larger buffet to pick from. But even though new things were attempted and the budget was bigger, it overall didn't meet the expectations that others and fans were wanting. So when you hear a third movie is being made and the bar was already kinda lowered, there didn't seem like there was much to lose and more to gain. So it seemed like a good idea to take some liberties and try something really new. Take a few risks, if you will. Like, say, a new super predator as the main threat. Yeah, it performed worse. Spiny killing rescues certainly didn't help on a fan base level, but it definitely felt like the budget suffered. Less characters, two very boring storylines that are the main focus of the movie. Will the Kirbys get back together? And typical search and rescue story that, well, every Jurassic movie has. It could be that most of the budget went to making the Spinosaurus from scratch, and making a fight the T-Rex couldn't have been cheap either, which is also probably why everything feels less. Even the runtime is about an hour and a half, while all the others make it to at least the 2-hour mark. You all know I really enjoy it, but I'm not the only audience member for it. So, in the end, it became the worst in the franchise. It may have had the biggest budget of the original trilogy, but wasn't even close to making that money back on its opening day. So, at that point, Jurassic Park had become a dead franchise, while still having the first film continue its legacy on being one of the greatest movies ever made. And I guess you could say, similar to the Jaws argument, didn't need to be a series to begin with. After having a probably unintentional trend of each film coming out 4 years after the other, we now get a new one 14 years later. And now the pressure is back on to make something special. For how underwhelming the last two films were and how long the gap was between 3 and this one, a mistake or two would be deemed okay. But if it was really messed up, that director would receive the ultimate backlash. See, even though the sequels didn't hold a candle to the first, there are still fans who are very passionate about the series, myself included. Similar to the Jurassic Park 4 websites, I don't think I'll ever find this again, but I have a vague memory of seeing an interview with Spielberg where he said he was going to be starting this film after Tintin. But I guess he couldn't come up with a good script for it. Then a new challenger approaches in the form of Colin Trevorrow, who took on the directing chair while Spielberg would produce it. Now, I don't know about you, but a question that appeared in my mind at the time was, Who is Colin Trevorrow? Oh, he's directed many classics before it, like Safety Not Guaranteed, Gary, Under Crisis, Reality Show, and Home Base. Oh, and I guess he partook in the story for episode 9. Whoops. Anyway, having someone who I'm gonna assume the grand majority of people have never heard of before, and who's really only ever directed one movie, direct what is essentially a reboot sequel to a beloved series that has been on hold for 14 years, doesn't sound like a good idea. But we had to go in with an open mind and see how he wanted this series to rise back up. I've been wanting to talk about this movie for a while, and actually was gonna save it for another time. But with the new movie Dominion now in production and set to release next year, maybe, I wanted to talk about the newer films before that one comes out. So, not even gonna tease the next review this time, the sequel is on the horizon. But let's finally start up this new adventure. Is it the dominant entry that brought the series back to life, or is it just a big old veloci-crap-tor? Let's find out by checking out...
We're gonna have fun with this thing.
So what makes this a reboot sequel? Well, the reboot part comes from the newer title in Jurassic World as opposed to Park. That simple name change alone already puts this film on a much grander scale than the previous films. Park feels small and contained. World feels endless and open. This is the start of a new trilogy that will not only have its own storyline, but amp up the story of the first movie as well. We also have a fresh cast of characters that, if you squint the right way, bear similarities to Jurassic Park's characters. But it's also a sequel because they acknowledge that the first film exists, and even a couple characters from there show up again. However, it should be mentioned now that they completely dropped the Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 stories, so they'll never even say the name Isla Sorna, in this movie anyway. They'll never make reference to the T-Rex in San Diego rampage, and we'll never know the outcome of the pterodons, not pterodactyls, that got loose at the end of the third movie. So technically, this movie wants to be the sequel to Jurassic Park, but I will not be dropping those storylines. So if I feel the need to compare this movie to Lost World or JP3, I'm gonna do so. Like, right now, for example. We start off Jurassic World, actually pretty different from the previous films. The first 3 started off with an accident happening on the island of importance, but this one starts off in a lab with a couple dino eggs hatching, in which case we only get a sneak peek at one of them. And it took me about 3 viewings after coming out on DVD to realize this will be our main predator of the movie. So even though it's small, it was still really awesome in the theaters seeing a Jurassic movie start off different. Kind of broke the trope a little bit. Unfortunately, a Jurassic cliche that remains that most people are getting really tired of are young characters who will probably need rescuing at some point. One is in the form of a young kid named Gray, played by Ty Simpkins, who is also the kid in Insidious. And to his credit, he is a likable dinosaur nerd. The other is Zach, played by Nick Robinson, who is kind of a stick in the mud, honestly. Almost always expressionless, can be a bit of a mini bully to Gray, and for some reason, they do this thing where he has a girlfriend but will also stare at other girls. Now, there is sort of a reason for him acting this way, although I could also be really stretching it with that third thing. These brothers would be the shadows of Tim and Lex, where they are young siblings who are visiting a family member who has some form of leadership at a dinosaur park. Their parents, Scott and, of course, Karen, played by Andy Buckley and Judy Greer respectively, drop them off at an airport where they partake in the obvious foreshadowing.
And remember, if something chases you,
and something a little extra.
So much for our last family breakfast.
Which I'm just gonna talk about right now and get it out of the way. Their parents are in the process of getting a divorce. They don't specifically talk about it until almost an hour in, and once they do, they never reference it again. By the end of the movie, I'm pretty sure they don't end up going through the divorce anyway. Now this is the main reason why Zach acts the way he does. And I guess the only reason why he stares at other girls is because he thinks that his current relationship won't last, much like how his parents' relationship isn't lasting. But that doesn't make it any less awkward when you just see him staring at other girls and not talking to them. Also, it's just a jerk thing to do. He does this staring thing like 3 times in the movie, and after the 3rd time, he never does it again, and it's never referenced. There's no resolution from it. I would have just skipped over this plot point, but Zach will start having a change of character not long after they talk about it. At that point, I don't mind him as much, but it makes you wonder why they couldn't just have him being a nice brother from the beginning, as well as not being a creep. This movie already has like 3 other plot threads. They didn't need this one thrown into the mix. But Gray and Zach go from airplane to ferry as it takes them to a very familiar looking island. And this was the first instance where I was just sunk in my seat and drawn into the atmosphere. All thanks to the amazing new sound of the Jurassic Park theme by Michael Giacchino.
Okay, those of you in the front of the train should be able to see our main gates, built with planes from the original park over 20 years ago.
Arranged to reach you at 1 o'clock. Can he slow down?
Nope.
Come on! Grant's got you VIP access, so you can get on all the rides without waiting in line. Let's go!
Dude, she said we had to wait.
I don't want to wait anymore!
Words can't perfectly summarize how awesome this was, especially when watching it in a theater with that surround sound. And I don't care what anyone says, I love this reveal of the new park. I've seen a review where someone said that this theme was put in the wrong spot. That should have been used for when we saw dinosaurs as opposed to seeing a couple buildings. My argument is we already know dinosaurs are gonna be in it. This theme works so well in the first movie because, well, it was the first adventure. It expresses the emotions that Grant, Saller, and Malcolm were feeling, but it was also the most realistic depiction on how dinosaurs looked. So in a way, it was like the dinosaurs were real from an audience perspective too. So it's like the characters and the audience are all in this sense of awe. But here, it had been 22 years since we've seen Nublar, so it felt like coming back to a childhood home. Not to mention, it's massively upgraded from the first film. Before it was kind of in its beta stages, but now it's up and open to the public, there are attractions now, and it overall has a new yet nostalgic feel. So I think the theme just as much works here as it did in the first film. I don't think Giacchino's a one-trick copy for just expertly composing a piece of music that was already made. I think the original scores of the Jurassic World soundtrack are fantastic.
Welcome to Jurassic World.
But I will say that this was a wasted opportunity for saying that. Mainly because I find it weird that they say this line not only after the theme is finished, but also after the reveal of the new park. Like, wouldn't it have made more sense to say it just before Gray opens those doors and the theme at that point reaches its peak?
Dude, she said we had to wait.
I don't want to wait anymore!
Welcome to Jurassic World.
When she says it, there's like no emotion behind it. Need I even compare this to when Hammond said, "Welcome to Jurassic Park"? Well, too bad, because I'm going to anyway. Not only is it like the quote of Jurassic Park, but it's also said as the theme plays, and then we have this amazing visual to go off of. It's beautifully crafted. Here, it's just kind of like, I said it. Also, I hate this shot of her just staring at the camera. I know she's technically talking to someone else, but this shot is so uncomfortable, and it just feels like she's breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience, nudging their shoulders a little bit and being like, did this line feel nostalgic? It was kind of sort of so in the first movie. Anyway, this is Claire, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, who, I'm just gonna say, they did not do her much justice with the character she was given. She's a very by-the-numbers person. She doesn't see the dinosaurs as animals with feelings. She sees them as numbers on a screen or tallies on a sheet of paper, refers to them as assets. Even on opening night, she was a predictable character, and I knew how she was eventually gonna be like pretty early on. She would technically be the reflection of Ellie Sattler, as she is a female lead scientist who may or may not have a thing for the main character. She's giving some investors a tour of the lab, discussing how they want to further the power they have of genetic mutation to the next level. She introduces them to the blueprint of their new dinosaur, the Indominus Rex. And yes, blueprint is a very appropriate word to use now.
Oh, Indominus wasn't bred. She was designed.
Henry Wu returns from the first movie, and as you just heard, this dinosaur was created from scratch. No known fossils discovered, no mosquito blood to extract. And that is the amped up storyline for this trilogy. See, it's never really said how long the park's been open, but I guess long enough for guests to get bored by the dinosaurs they already got, which I find that to be
one big pile of shit.
But due to that reasoning, they want to make the dinosaurs more exciting, and they're not gonna get that from dinosaurs that already existed. So long gone are the days of just using African frog DNA to fill in the gaps of specific species. Now it's all about walking up to Wu like,
I'll take a double triple bossy deluxe on a raft, 4x4 animal style, extra shingles with a shimmy and a squeeze, light axle grease, make it cry, burn it and let it swim.
Before, it was kind of explored that when you use different animal DNA to complete a genome, it changes the traits of the original creature. Examples: raptors in real life were never that big, and Dilophosaurus never used gunk shot. You take out any boring explanations on wanting to make them scary for movie reasons, and have the more fun mindset of bridging stories together, it's possible that more than just frogs were used at the original park. Just any others remain secret. As you'll come to find out, Wu really likes keeping those. This time around, they go on full throttle with it. That is, technically, the first stupid decision made in this trilogy. However, there's a bit of a difference with this one, in the sense where I actually think it's pretty brilliant. See, Wu is kind of becoming a villain himself. He should well aware know what happened to the original park. The dinosaurs eventually could not be controlled. They couldn't be fenced in forever, not all of them remained female like he designed them to be, and with him being an employee, he had to have gotten some form of notice saying, hey, all the dinosaurs broke out, the park plan's canceled, your last check will be mailed. Hammond may have had the dream, but Wu had the tools. Those dinos were his brand. In fact, if you want to pretend that the Easel Sorna stories aren't dropped and you want to get all film theory on this, let's go back to JP3 for a sec. Remember this line?
I remember that on InGen's list.
It's because it wasn't on their list, and that makes you wonder what else they were up to.
1. That implies the Spinosaurus was fairly new, and when they explored that abandoned lab, there were failed clones of the Spinosaurus, which could mean Wu continued his work on Sorna. And as a separate side note, it could also be the reason why the Spinosaurus was not only strong enough to kill the T-Rex, but also withstand the T-Rex's attacks. Because let's go to the game Jurassic World Evolution for a sec, which is canon to the series. By default, if you pit a Spinosaurus against a T-Rex, the T-Rex is gonna win. However, it is possible to amp up the Spinosaurus strong enough to kill the T-Rex itself. It's ungodly expensive and it might fail to hatch 17 times, but you can still do it. 2. This storyline is the long-awaited 14-year foreshadowing answer on what else InGen was up to. Both islands had their intentions, but both already failed. And unfortunately, in more ways than one, Hammond isn't around anymore. But Wu still continues to do this. He doesn't care what the outcome is. As you'll come to find out, really only him and maybe a few select people know entirely what goes into making these new hybrids. The ironic thing is, he is not necessarily the one to blame because he just makes them. It's other people that give him the idea. Now, why do I give this a pass but still consider other stupid moments in the series as just stupid moments? It's because every other time, the outcome resulted in the initiator or initiators getting surprised that something negative happened as a result. Sarah and Nick bring the injured baby T-Rex to their trailer to heal it. Good cause, the heart was in the right place. But when the adults showed up, it's like it was the biggest epiphany of Sarah's life. Like she didn't factor in that the adults would be on the search, even though she should be smart enough to know that that's what they would do. Now, I know she's not the one that went to the nest and grabbed the baby Rex, but she also didn't do a whole lot to stop him either. It's also because she says this to Malcolm and not Nick, even though Malcolm already knew this was gonna happen. Amanda screams through a megaphone, and Nash, Cooper, and Udesky blindly go into a jungle to set a perimeter on an island where they know dinosaurs roam freely since they, you know, had just flown over a good chunk of it, and then gets the biggest shock of their lives when they hear the roar of / see a disturbed and angry giant dinosaur. Back in Jurassic World, Wu knows the destruction a hybrid like this can cause. Everyone else just sucks at handling it, as you'll come to find out. I deem him as a mad scientist who's willing to push the boundaries anytime he gets the chance. He will try to debunk this later, saying it's not mad science, but I believe that about as much as I believe Jigsaw isn't actually murdering anyone that ends up in a trap and fails. Wu could have just not continued this work, or at the very least say no when given something too insane sounding. Wu's definitely sticking around a lot longer than in the first movie, and I like him as a character. I'm just saying. Gray and Zach head into the new Innovation Center, which has a very nice Spinosaurus display nearby. And as if the new modifying hybrids wasn't a good enough indication, the whole park is decked out with new futuristic technology, and as I stated before, has actual attractions, such as canoeing with herbivores, a safari kind of ride where you can be driven alongside a herd of gallimimus. Or is it a flock? I don't know. And they straight up got a Shamu type show that features what is said to have been the largest sea creature to have ever existed. The Mosasaurus. When I saw it in the trailer, not only was I hyped about a brand new dinosaur that I'd never seen before, but I was excited to know what they were gonna do with it. Because they wouldn't just show this thing and then not utilize it. And being that it's very limited on where it can go, they would have to get pretty creative with it to get it involved with any action scenes. And I'm just saying, they didn't disappoint. Anyway, Claire's the relative, the aunt in fact of Gray and Zach. And here's another reason why I don't care for her. She's a horrible family member. She hasn't seen her nephews in years, and yet when they meet up, she barely has an ounce of excitement to see them. And other than the whole staring at other girls thing, this is another reason why Zach acts the way he does. He's not really excited to see her either. They made a plan for when they met up, but she puts business before family. So, another predictable arc she will go through to see family is more important than business. Even though they travel by plane and ferry by themselves, they can't just explore the park by themselves. So we get the proper introduction to Zara, or as I like to refer to her as, Miss British Lawyer. She may not be a lawyer, but she also would have been totally forgettable if not for one specific kind of scene. She's basically gonna be their babysitter. So after having essentially a less than 5-minute reunion, Claire goes on over to the control room. Here we get introduced to Lowry, who for a long time I thought his name was Larry and they were just pronouncing it weird until I saw his name spelled. Played by Jake Johnson, who also played the principal in 21 Jump Street. I would closely relate him to Ian Malcolm since he is the comic relief character. He also, in a way, tries to talk sense into someone who is very oblivious. In Malcolm's case, it was trying to explain to Hammond that, hey, this may be a dream, but this is also going too far. But Hammond is still like, no, this is a good idea. And here in Lowry's case, it's to tell Claire that, hey, these dinosaurs are animals, they're not just digits. There's also Vivian, played by Lauren Lapkus. She's like the comic relief partner, but Lowry will become more of an essential, and honestly, there's really no one else to compare her to since I kind of ran out of female characters from the first movie. You know what? Fuck it, this lady. Right. Now here's where they really start referencing the first movie, making this a sequel.
Where did you get that?
Oh, this? I got it on eBay.
Didn't occur to you maybe that's in poor taste?
Yeah, no, it did. I understand people died. It was terrible, but that first park was legit.
This scene, however, has 2 continuity errors, at least from my perspective. And of course, Feel free to correct me or give me your thoughts if you think otherwise. 1. How is there Jurassic Park merch if the original park was never opened or endorsed? 2. It seems like everyone here wants to bury all of the events of the original park in the past, to the point of not even wanting to reference the name. But doesn't that get kind of tossed out the window when the monorail driver mentions it?
Okay, those of you in the front of the train should be able to see our main gates, built with planes were from the original park over 20 years ago.
Which, by the way, I found out that that is the voice of Brad Bird, director of The Incredibles and previously aboard the Landmaster, Iron Giant. And I guess while on the topic of director voiceover cameo, Mr. DNA is back, voiced by Trevorrow. But yeah, those are 2 continuity errors to me, and unfortunately not the last ones. But let's get out of this control room already.
Let's go meet another character.
Here comes Simon Masrani as Hammond's replacement, both in character similarities and, well, story continuity. He's the owner of the park, a nice guy, and he cares a lot about the dinosaurs. And this is about where it became obvious to me that Claire's gonna change her attitude about halfway through the film.
Are the animals enjoying life?
We don't have a way to measure the animal's emotional experience.
Sure you do. You can see in their eyes, right?
Of course.
Why is he flying a helicopter?
I got my license. 2 more. Well, 2 more days.
Oh my god, they did not just do a 2 days before retirement line.
Jurassic World exists to remind us how very small we are, how new. You can't put a price on that. Now please, we're flying.
But they arrive at the new paddock where the Indominus is held. Let's talk about this thing. We talked about the reveals of Rexy and Spiny back in the JP3 review. Both are different, but effective in their own way. Slow and suspenseful versus quick and crazy. But now, the Indominus Rex also sort of has a new way of getting revealed. Technically, it was revealed in the first shot of the movie, but in the theater, I didn't know that, so not having figured that out, it mainly gets revealed from how the characters describe and talk about it. Even when they try to take a look at it, a lot of it is hidden despite being in broad daylight. It just kind of stares at them, almost like she's planning something. Masrani makes what we would probably consider an odd thing to point out.
Oh, it's white. You never told him it was white.
Why do you gotta make it a white thing?
This is a small, yet good example of Wu keeping some details to himself, or even these hybrids being way too unpredictable to create. But it wouldn't be against Wu to keep things from other people. Let's go back to movie 1 again. Remember when the baby raptor was hatching and Hammond was like,
Henry, why didn't you tell me? I insist on being here when they're born.
May not have meant much back then as an audience member, but now the whole perspective's changed. Claire also brings up that she can detect thermal radiation, kinda like snakes. But the scene also has dialogue that kinda leads to continuity error later. Claire talking about how they originally had 2, but this one ate the other. The sibling possibly being the first egg we didn't see hatch all the way in the beginning. But in order to get to that, we gotta meet someone else. Owen, played by Chris Pratt. He's no paleontologist, more on the Navy side of things, but had some moralistic characteristics, a heart for dinosaurs, some main character juice, and a dash of raptor passion, and boom, we got our new Dr. Grant. And speaking of, raptors play a very different role this time around. They are the same pack hunters we're familiar with, but these ones are treated differently. They're no longer specifically monsters, they're kind of like characters themselves. They share a bond with Owen, as he basically raised them from birth. A lot of people made fun of this, saying that he can control the raptors, calling him the Raptor Whisperer, and thinking that this was kind of a stupid thing to do. But I think it was a great way to change things up, and was probably the most realistic way this could happen. Now keep in mind, they are still raptors. No matter how much you train them, they'll still have that hunting instinct. And these ones have names. Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Blue. But not everyone is given a name, or at least one that will be acknowledged. Owen's work partner over here is named Barry, played by Omar Sy. But they never say his name in the movie. You'd really only know from IMDb, or in my case, well, I got Jurassic World. And, I don't know, let's just say Robert Muldoon. Finally, the last of the new characters that have some form of importance, not just dino food at least, is Hoskins, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. You can really only compare him to Dennis since he's pretty much the villain and is responsible for some major tragedies happening. So in the very beginning of this video, I said when Jurassic Park 4 was being rumored up the gaping glute, they said it would have weaponized dinosaurs. Welp. They kinda went with it in this one, though not quite in the way we all thought it was gonna be. The expectation was they were gonna have weapons actually attached to them, like say, Spinosaurus with a buzzsaw for a fin, and that it was gonna be the worst decision they could ever come up with. But guess what? Even though that's not quite what they're doing, still don't like it. No, since the Raptors are able to take commands from Owen, Hoskins sees them as plausible war weapons. So like taking the Raptors to Iraq or something and relying on them and whatever other dinos they can create that can take orders to eat the enemies. Barry, despite technically being nameless, is a pretty smart character and immediately sees the flaw in relying on Raptors to be weapons.
These guys are gonna run straight into the enemy's teeth and eat them, belt buckle and all.
What if they decide they want to be in control?
We terminate the rogues. Promote only loyal bloodlines.
Nevertheless, that is Hoskins' goal in this whole picture. Claire goes to fetch Owen to have a look at the Indominus paddock by Miss Ronnie's request. Now, I like Chris Pratt. I think he's a funny guy and I like him in this film. This scene is all about relationship troubles. And let me tell you, I really get sick and tired of these storylines. They tried being together, but then their differences got the better of them, so there was no second date. Let me guess, it's a 2010s movie, so they're gonna end up together anyway? They gonna continue bickering until they make out? Okay, then we don't need to reference that subplot in this series ever again. Right? Despite some early bickering, Owen goes with Claire to the paddock.
The Indominus Rex makes us relevant again.
The Indominus Rex.
We needed something scary and easy to pronounce. You should hear a 4-year-old try to say Archaeornithomimus.
We should hear you try to say it.
I can do you one better. Try naming some of the Earthbound immortals on the first try. This time, when Claire takes Owen to see Indy, we get that continuity error I mentioned before.
Animals raised in isolation aren't always the most functional.
Your raptors are born in captivity.
With siblings, they learn social skills. The only positive relationship this animal has is with that crane.
So she needs a friend. We should schedule playdates, that sort of thing.
Yes, that whole we gave her a sibling and she ate it detail just kind of went. Because she says it the one time and then it's never brought up again. You know, that happens a lot in this movie. Claire also pretty much confirms here that only the Woo crew knows what goes into making these dinos.
The base genome is a T-Rex, the rest is classified. The lab delivers us finished assets and we show them to the public.
But I'll mention some of the classified genomes right now since these particular ones will never be referenced. Specifically for its structure with T-Rex, we just got a few others in the form of, oh god, okay, here we go. Giganotosaurus, Majungasaurus, Carnotaurus, Rogops, Therizinosaurus, Pycnonymosaurus, Quilmosaurus, Viavenator, and Deinosuchus. Good Jesus-saurus Christ, where do they get these names from? But I think it's time to discuss a huge factor that really makes people just go, oh, come on! The dino attacks. Because, I mean, the Indominus gotta break out somehow, otherwise we won't have a movie. She becomes undetected by the cameras, everyone thinks she escaped because Owen notices some claw markings on a far-off wall. Claire immediately goes into panic mode, and instead of calling the control room there and asking where she's at, she decides to run to her car and then do that. I got a joke for you. A main character, a fat guy, and a random nameless employee walk into a carnivore paddock. You already know what the punchline is. But hey, gotta say, these guys deserve some kind of award considering they are the first victims in a 14-year-long Jurassic gap to get eaten by a dinosaur. Owen manages to survive by hiding under a truck and cutting the, oh god, fuel lines? I am not a car scientist, okay? He makes magical vehicle liquid spill onto him and Indy is repelled. So on top of detecting thermal radiation, we can now include being able to lower her own heat signatures to become undetected by infrared and being able to set up traps. But then how is Owen and Claire not able to see her from the viewing gallery? A way that is truly terrifying in theory, but underwhelming in the long run. It can camouflage! It can camouflage! Don't interrupt me! She can camouflage. So, hey, at least we finally have an appropriate reason for a super predator to just show up out of nowhere. And hey, I got another joke for you. An ACU with non-lethal weapons walk into a— Do I even need to finish? Masrani goes to have a chat with Wu about how his creation's going. My guess is, it could have gone better. And here we get 2 new confirmed ingredients that went into making the Indominus.
Cuttlefish genes were added to help her withstand an accelerated growth rate. Cuttlefish have chromatophores that allow the skin to change color. Tree frogs can modulate their infrared output. We use strands from their DNA to adapt her to a tropical climate.
So we got T-Rex, tree frog, cuttlefish, and even though it was technically used as a comparison, I think it's safe to say that they included snake DNA. Pit viper, to be specific. At least that's what I read. I don't know, I read pit adder at one point and then pit viper. I don't know if there's a difference between adder and viper, but snake was probably used. This is about where Wu breaks it to Masrani that, yeah, it sucks that it broke out and just killed a lot of people, but you technically asked for it. This is where the whole it's not mad science mindset comes from, but I still stand by that Wu could have said no or not continued this kind of work after the failure of the first park. Speaking of failure, let's now delve into the young characters that need rescuing, starting with Zara failing at her one job. Gray and Zach had ran away from her so they can check out the park for themselves. Where troubles truly begin is when they queue up for the Gyrosphere ride, which is kind of a replacement for the Ford Explorers. The difference is that this is a rather badly designed ride that lets riders free handle a glass ball to drive around a field of larger herbivores, not only because a rotten person could just harass the dinosaurs if they really wanted to, but it's also got to be very inconvenient for those who are in line. There really isn't a time limit on how long you can be in a sphere for, and even if there is, you can just be a dick and not return to the station, as you'll see right here. To try and get park guests to safety, but not exactly say that there's a wild man-eating genetically modified dinosaur running loose, Claire orders that certain attractions be closed and everyone gathered to the main plaza. I think it's called Main Street, but I'm calling it a plaza. One of those attractions happens to be the gyrospheres. However, this announcement was made to the employees the moment Zach and Gray are in their sphere and get moving. The employee radios all the spheres to return, but Zach insists on continuing on. See, keep in mind that this scene happens after they talk about the divorce stuff. Up to this point, Gray had been excited to be here and wanted his bro to feel the same way. But, as stated before, he's a stick and has just seemed very bored and uninterested in everything here. But when this ride is asked to close down, now Zach decides to be involved and try to help Gray have a fun time. When Claire finds out Zara sucks at her job, she calls up Zach to actually warn him about the Indominus, but the reception is bad inside and can't quite make it out. This is the second time that a warning was trying to be sent out and then it's just reception is bad. So those two continue on and Claire finds Owen to go on a search and rescue. Zach drives them out of ride boundaries to find a herd of Ankylosaurus. Leading up to this moment was really stupid, but admittedly, I like the way Indy appears here.
You're welcome. Up close and personal with 4 dinosauruses.
Ankylosaurus. We shouldn't be here. And there's 5 dinosaurs.
Aren't you supposed to be a genius or something? Look. 1, 2, 3, 4.
5.
The sphere gets kicked around until they are stuck upside down and get a front row seat of Ankylosaurus versus Indominus. Indominus wins, but I won't show the killing blow. I'd feel bad rewatching that over and over again. But it's basically at this moment where Zach completely changes character. Not only is he going to be a better brother from here on out and not in a smart-assy way, but now he grows a heart for the dinosaurs. However, there's not a whole lot of time for character building because Claire tries calling him again, but his cell phone fell onto the ceiling and vibrates, getting Indy's attention. As you'd likely know, young characters may get injured, but they never get eaten, so she helps them escape and they jump down into a river. She's apparently more impatient than me playing Coaster Planet and doesn't do water despite having cuttlefish DNA because she doesn't jump in with them or wait long enough for them to pop their heads out of the water. Owen and Claire are on the trail but come across a severely injured Brachiosaurus on the verge of dying, and with Claire being up close to it, develops a heart for dinosaurs and has her attitude change. So, yeah, Zach and Claire basically had the exact same story arc. Riveting. Seeing/knowing about a dinosaur eating its sibling was okay, but the emotions come flooding out when this one is in the process of dying. Now, it is a sad scene in my opinion, and it's only gonna get worse in the next movie. But similar to Zach, why was it necessary for Claire to have this not caring character trait? It'd be one thing if she had this trait for the whole picture, but the way everyone talks to her about dinosaurs being real animals and not just assets made it way too obvious she was gonna change. Honestly, there are character changes and twists in movies that I don't see coming the first time, but many others do, and That was also the case with another part of this film we've yet to see, and I'm sure y'all know what it is. But I saw this one happening from a mile away. There was nothing wrong with her being associated with these dinos, but also caring about them from the beginning. Could have even had some interesting chemistry between her and Wu. But the search for the bros must continue on. Cutting back to them, they come across... favorite scene number 3. There's no doubt about it. Nothing screams nostalgia than new characters stepping foot into the old visiting center. If seeing the new park felt like returning to a childhood home, this is returning to a childhood home. The unfortunate thing, and what may ruin it for certain viewers, is when they come across the old Jeeps and try repairing one after sitting and rotting away for over 20 years. Not gonna get super detailed, but it's oversimplified and every auto major just cringed at this. Right when they drive off is also the moment Owen and Claire show up. And unfortunately, it's Claire's turn to get close and personal with Indy. To literally running away from the nostalgia. Indominus pretty much goes on another rampage, and Ultra Super Mega Expiala Bull Honky takes place when Masrani decides to fly a helicopter with 2 Air Force soldiers. One of them having a Gatling or minigun. I don't know. I'm not good with weapons either. Leave me alone! Who this time tried to kill it, but they miss every single shot and every bullet lands right behind her. She runs into the aviation enclosure and I guess yells at the newly introduced Dimorphodons to attack the helicopter. Eventually, the copter itself just gets shredded up too much to keep flight, which makes Masrani the honorary holder of first death by explosion in this whole series. With him gone, it gives Hoskins full control on what the next maneuver is. But before we get to that, we miraculously go from one of the most embarrassing scenes to one of the best. The Dimorphodons were not just done with the helicopter. They fly on over to the main plaza and cause mayhem over there. Another refreshing thing to see. Obviously, we've seen a decently large group of people attacked by dinos in Lost World, but here is an entire theme park filled with tourists. It's got this new adrenaline rush for me. But that's not the only refreshing thing here. Gray, Zach, Owen, and Claire make it back to this location as all this takes place, though they are still split in separate locations. Zara finally finds the bros hanging around that Spinosaurus display as one of the Dimorphodons finds her, picks her up, plays catch with a couple buddies, and drops her in a very familiar looking spot. They splash around for a bit, but then the Mosasaurus is like, playtime is over, and gets a 2-for-1 meal, making Zara the first female character to get an on-screen death in these films. There may have been a female character or two in the second Indominus attack, but you really only still saw dudes getting chomped and stomped all up in that romp. In fact, I think that's why they hold on this moment for so long, to really let it sink in that this is the first woman with a name in this franchise that will be getting a death scene. And listen, there better not be any dorks out there that takes this as a woman-hating discussion, which is getting kind of boring seeing only dudes get eaten for so long, but the Mosasaurus really showed some equality and said, it don't gotta be just dudes. Another Jurassic cliche broken. Thank you, Jurassic World. The main four finally make it to being in the same frame at one time, but there's not a whole lot of time for reunions. Night finally arrives. Seriously, like, if you really think about it. Ray and Zach went from home to airport to ferry and then to Isla Nublar, checked into a hotel, went to at least 3 different attractions, excluding monorail rides. Claire pitched the Indominus to investors, had 2 different people go to her paddock at different times. She broke out, the bros left park boundaries, got attacked and chased by Indy, took a slow stroll through the visitor center, magically fixed a probably 22-year-old Jeep with like a battery and a wrench. Owen and Claire went on a search and rescue, also ended up at the visitor center and attacked/chased by Indy. The owner of the park went from 2 days to helicopter license to dead, and an entire theme park was just attacked by Dimorphodons. And they didn't even hit dinner hours yet. It's about that time for the weaponized dinosaurs part of the story to take place. Keep in mind, Owen really hates this idea, but I mean, they quite frankly have no more options left. How about hiring gunsmen that can actually shoot large targets? They have no more options left, so they use a chunk of flesh the Indominus ripped off herself, which she used as a trap in an earlier scene, to have the raptors smell it and run on after her. This time we got a heavier equipped security team that is not afraid to kill the thing, and the raptors get equipped with streaming cams to get a first-person view of the action. Claire, Zach, and Gray hang out in a medical vehicle while Owen, Barry, and security go after Indy. We get that cool shot of Owen riding a motorcycle alongside raptors running, and pretty soon end up right in the danger zone. Indy comes out and stands completely still while nobody shoots at her, and communicates with the raptors, giving us the reveal of the plot twist that, in all honesty, and as I hinted at before, I didn't see coming.
I know why they wouldn't tell us what it's made of. What? That thing's part raptor.
You hear the beating of your heart, you know the screaming's gonna start. Here comes the really scary part, 'cause it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night. It's terror time again. Oh, you just might die of fright. It's a terrifying time.
Owen gets spotted by Charlie, and they almost have a moment, but that gets interrupted pretty quick. Charlie gets hit and killed by another RPG shot. Really? They couldn't hit a target as big as the Indominus, but they can bullseye a regular raptor? But even with Charlie out of the way, that doesn't stop Blue from trying to attack Barry inside a log. And the whole time this was happening, I was thinking, don't let him die, don't let him die, don't let him die, don't let him die. And thankfully, they pulled through on this one, guys. Owen distracts her with his motorcycle and Barry lives, finally breaking another Jurassic cliché of the black guy dying. But then, it's still a little bittersweet that they never say his name. But we still gotta get Claire, Zach, and Gray involved with this scene, so how are we gonna do that? How about we have one of the security guys run to the vehicle, yell at Claire to drive away, run to the back, open up the doors, and... completely unaware of what just happened, she drives off with Gray and Zach in the open for a raptor to jump in. Now, to its credit, it's kind of a fun action scene and has a bit of a suspense factor to it. While all this happens, Wu is packed up with more dino embryos and evacuating the scene, leaving the sequel open. The rest of the staff is asked to evacuate, but Laurie stays behind in the control room. Our main characters escape the raptors and head to the lab to find it all being packed away. Hoskins shows up here in expositions about how they plan on making a pack of small Indominuses to be InGen's war weapons. Because let me tell you, they are doing a fanatic job dealing with one big Indominus and... well, at one point 4 raptors. But it seems a little late in the movie for exposition scenes, so we get a very odd transition from story to getting interrupted.
A living weapon unlike anything we've ever seen. You see, millions of years of evolution. What'd we learn? Nature is the gift.
Yeah, Hoskins dies here. It was obvious from his first scene, but it's kind of sort of off-screen-ish, so it's not a rewarding enough kill. But there's something that really bugs me about how he was explaining stuff for story purposes, and really going into conversation, and then it's like someone behind the scenes said, "Who cares?" and threw a raptor in to interrupt. I guess it's to kind of leave room for explanations in the next film, but they will do this sort of thing again when we get there. It may technically be a dumb storyline, but being that it is their new and main one, it doesn't seem right that they just kind of toss it aside like this. Echo chases them outdoors and gets temporarily distracted by a holographic Dilophosaur, but Delta and Blue meet them outside, making them a bit surrounded. But Owen uses his strengths to gain all three of their respect back. Respect isn't really the right word there, but I didn't know what else to use, which was just in time for the Indominus finally making it to the main plaza. She presumably orders Blue to attack, but she's all like, "Try me, bitch." But then gets swiped away by Indy. Echo and Delta attack her, but Echo eventually gets tossed on a grill and gets burned to death, and Delta takes a very bad chomp to the back and dies from that. Gray gives Claire the idea to find more teeth, as that's actually kind of been sort of a running joke through the movie. So to try and find some, she runs past the Spinosaurus display to find more. As she goes and does that, Indy tries nabbing Gray, Zack, and Owen in a kiosk. And we get the most badass visual in this movie upon Claire having Laurie open the paddock doors of an old friend. Good old Rexy is back, and being that this is the same Rex as in the first movie, I'm gonna go ahead and say this is the best T-Rex scene in the entire franchise. And this is about to lead to one of the best scenes in any Jurassic movie. But alas, there is one thing that you all might have expected me to talk about, and you bet I'm gonna. Hope you guys like rants, cause I got a lot to say about this couple seconds. Gonna start off by saying that, honestly, I didn't even notice this when I saw it for the first time in theaters. I was so blown away by seeing the original Rex again that I was blindsided to it breaking through that Spino display. I didn't even know it did until I saw Doug Walker's sibling rivalry of this film and they brought it up. Well, his spoiler corner of it, but you know what I mean. Doug will be coming back in this rant, so stay tuned for that. Specifically Nostalgia Critic in his reviews of Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 3. But keep in mind, this will not affect my overall rating of this film. Also, I will not be doing an entire re-explanation as to why I like the Spinosaurus, so you're spared from that. Made a whole video that exhausts pretty much every single detail as to why it had been my favorite in the series. So with that, here we go. It's plainly obvious that they did this because of the Spinosaurus killing T-Rex scene. How do I know this with all the confidence that's in me? Because this seems like a very specific coincidence that a T-Rex happens to be breaking through a display that represents a dinosaur that killed another one of its brethren on another island. It was the most hated thing in the third film, and this was like their way of fixing that mistake. Here's where my problems come in. It's completely unnecessary. First off, it was a completely different director, so there's no need to fix what a completely different person did 14 years ago. Second, this is a movie that wants to completely drop those Easelosaurus stories, but that doesn't really work when you have this big of an Easter egg. Third, this is unfortunately what a T-Rex toxic fanboy looks like in cinema form, and therefore, it also feels immature to have this moment. I think I've said time and time again that if you're a fan of the Rex and it's your favorite dinosaur, that's perfectly fine, but it's the people that will berate others for liking a different dinosaur more than the T-Rex that just ruin the mood. So I mean, if you're not one of those people, then let's be dino friends or something. Anyway, even though the dinos in the movies are not 100% accurate to their real-life counterparts, what if these movies are really your only window for seeing dinosaurs? Would you want to see the exact same ones 4, 5, 6 movies in a row? Or would you like to get a little more variety? Maybe see a dinosaur you didn't know existed, wasn't really in the realm of very commonly known species, and overall, took you by surprise. Is it really such a heinous crime for people to like those new additions? I don't think it is. Now what's this crap got to do about Nostalgia Critic? Well, keep in mind I'm not attacking him or anything. He's entertained me for many, many years, well before his 100th review. Even though nowadays I don't keep up with him as much, I still have a little bit of respect for him and the stuff that he does. But unfortunately, he's kind of the face of a T-Rex toxic fanboy. I say that because of when he reviewed the first Jurassic Park and got to that first T-Rex scene. Now, screaming and shrieking at the top of his lungs is a common criticism of the character in general, but if that's your way of expressing excitement, then more power to you. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But for me, he has that really crappy metal I'm a mother effing T-Rex song. I'm a motherfucking T-Rex! Which, in case you were curious, I referenced it in my Night at the Museum review. I like dinosaurs, I like T-Rexes, I like Rexy, and he doesn't need a shitty metal song to be any cooler. Yeah, that's enough out of you. Get the fuck. I really don't like that song, man. He's got these extreme subtitles every time the T-Rex roars. And after the ad break, what are we greeted back with?
We do each other good, T-Rex.
I mean, look at that. Not only does it ruin the mood, but it's way too over the top. And especially as a reaction to a scene that wasn't even really going for action as much as it was going for nothing but suspense and a bit of a horror feel. I'm a Spiny fan, but you never heard or saw me going to those extremes, and you never will. Remember, I'm not saying every T-Rex fan is like this, but because of Critic's popularity, this is unfortunately how a large majority of people may think this is how a Rex fan acts. Recall a little ways back to that very short mishap between Critical and Vegan Gains.
They vilify anyone who's not a vegan. They treat it like a cult where you're a huge piece of shit, evil and wrong if you're not in their club. Now, of course, I'm not talking about everyone who is a vegan. I am talking about this community that Vegan Gains has fostered here.
Similar thing applies here. You can also tell he's being a toxic fanboy because he will never call another large predator by its name.
So after the T-Rex is killed by the who cares-asaurus.
And this also sometimes seems like that's how he is outside character.
I'm watching this movie thinking, really, am I just getting this fucking Cotuosaurus? You shut your fucking mouth, the T-Rex is awesome, nobody takes that bitch down, and the fact that they have her lose to this Bimorovosaurus, you know, thing, it's just like, no, fuck you, this movie said, hey, you know what, all the people that thought that, you know what, no, shut it, you shut your fucking whore mouth.
Also kind of talks down to those who may find the Indominus to be their favorite dinosaur in the series, which I don't like that he does that. Now, how does his JP3 review come into this rant? He's obviously gonna be super upset that this T-Rex dies, which, again, there's nothing wrong if you don't like the scene. I don't like it either. But then he proceeds to do this skit.
Hey there, kiddo. You like your Dora the Explorer doll?
Sure do.
Well, what would you think if I got you a brand new Barbie doll?
Oh, that's okay. I love Dora.
No, you love Barbie.
The takeaway here is that you're being forced to like something new when you prefer what you already have. But let's try looking at this skit from a different point of view. What if the daughter saw the Barbie doll and liked it, then spent more time playing with that but still liking her Dora doll? This skit only favors Critic's opinion, so you're not gonna see it that way. But I'm just saying. So let's flip the scripts a little bit and put me into this perspective in regards to Jurassic World. Because of JP3, I like the Spinosaurus, and it's like my favorite dinosaur. Now this new director comes along and makes the Rex break through a display that represents a dinosaur that I like a little bit more. Now the roles seem a little reversed, don't they? Listen, if JP3 was really trying to say, you don't like the T-Rex, you like Spinosaurus now, then to me, Jurassic World says, actually, you don't like the Spinosaurus. I'm sure you meant to say that the T-Rex is superior. I hope this rant made even the slightest bit of sense, because I've been wanting to talk about these particular moments in a video for quite a while. But as I said, Rexy simply breaking through the display is not like a con or anything, but it does lead into something that may be considered a bit of a flaw for the film in general. It took me a while to think about, and please let me know if it feels or felt the same for you. Why does this feel like a scheme to get audiences to like this film? All of the nostalgic moments, the theme in the opening, the slightly similar characters, welcome to Jurassic World. A trip inside the old visitor center, a helicopter landing as the best part of the original Jurassic Park theme plays, and basically this moment to try and undo what you could probably assume was the reason why the Jurassic Park series was dead for so long. It sometimes feels like they did these things so just in case their original stuff wasn't good enough, they could rely on these nostalgic moments to make people like the film a lot more, and forget about the newer stuff and idiotic decisions the characters make. It's kind of like when Siskel and Ebert reviewed Liar Liar. They enjoyed the film, but Gene comments on how he didn't like that they put a blooper reel in the credits, because it seemed to him like a cheap way to get the audience to laugh if the movie itself wasn't deemed funny. But I'm glad to have gotten that talked about and done with, because now it's time for the best scene in this whole movie. And I'll say, second or third to being the best scene in this whole freaking franchise. A real dino fight between Rexy and Indy. The music is kick-ass. The energy and overall action is incredible. Take some notes, Joe Johnson. This is how you do a freaking dinosaur fight. Indy gets the upper hand, and this franchise probably would have failed and stayed dead if Rexy was finished off here, but Rexy gets an assist trophy. And now it's like a tag team fight of the two iconic and nostalgic predators versus the hybrid super predator that houses both of their genomes. They take her down and push her back next to a fence, which looks like it has some water behind it. And hell yeah! Mosey comes in for the fatality and drags Indy down under. Too bad that cuttlefish DNA don't come equipped with quills. God damn. Too bad that cuttlefish DNA don't come equipped with gills. Blue runs off in the jungle as the lone raptor survivor, and the original Tyrannosaurus Rex steps up to the helipad to claim its throne as king once again. Jurassic World's a little complicated for someone like me to judge. Seeing this for the first time in theaters was such an amazing feeling. It's one of those things where I wish I could just relive that experience. The action was incredible, the nostalgic moments really captivated me, and at the time, I thought it was one of the greatest movies I had ever seen. In fact, I was one of those people where if someone spoke negatively about it a lot, I would have a "you don't know what you're talking about" attitude. I wouldn't express it, leave any comments or anything, it would just be like a mental note. But as time went on and saw this film over and over, started noticing that maybe this film wasn't as good as I originally thought. Now, even on opening night, I didn't care for Claire, Zach, Hoskins, the weaponized dinosaur story, and divorce subplot. And man, with all these random unrelated subplots that don't really seem to resolve fluently, it's as if like 6 different people were involved with the writing. And that's cause there were 6 people involved with the writing. 2 wrote the story and 4 for screenplay. And take a look at who one of them was. But I eventually noticed the 2 things that for me really held it back and that I've already talked about. The majority of the setups to have a dino attack happen, and maybe a little too much nostalgia that can be seen as a distraction. Obviously some nostalgia is okay, but there is such thing as going overboard with it. Because seeing this for the first time, I definitely like some of the new and original stuff they put in here, but I think the nostalgia and similarities to the first film did distract me from the other flaws that I didn't notice until it came out on DVD. But I guess it's time to go in a bit more depth on the technical star of the show, the Indominus. Now that we know all of what went into it, what were my overall thoughts? First time seeing it, thought it was really awesome. I even ranked her higher than the Spinosaurus at that time. But then I eventually noticed the biggest flaw with it. The fancier abilities, camouflage, lowering heat signatures, detecting other heat sources even when hidden, are inconsistent and were not intended. Lowering her own heat signatures was only utilized once, so she could trick the humans and escape the paddock. The camouflage was used twice, again to escape her paddock, but only used it the second time to explain why she couldn't be physically seen in her paddock. And possibly a third time when she appears behind Gray and Zach when they're looking at that Ankylosaurus herd, but I don't know for sure about that one. And I guess you could say she did utilize her heat detection quite a bit more, which is why she pretty much immediately knew where Eggman was hidden, where Owen and Claire were hiding, and everyone was pretty much on a critical time limit since Indy was finding her way to the main plaza where all the tourists are. But she eventually becomes the hunted so quick that you kind of forget she can even do that. So the things that make the Indominus really cool are just side effects. Regardless, there's no doubt in my mind that they really took advantage of the screen time she had. She made many memorable moments, for better or for worse, and when she does utilize those abilities, call me a broken record, it's pretty freaking cool. She finally gave creativity to a series that for the most part, felt pretty much the same. There's also no doubt in my mind that if I saw this at the same age that Jurassic Park 3 came out, she would have definitely scared the crap out of me too. However, while she does have a lot of screen time, unlike Spiny, she's also very inconsistent. And while, again, Indy had some very memorable moments, nothing she ever did will top Rexy's return. I know Rexy made a cameo in the beginning of the film, but this shot of her just slowly appearing from the redness of the flare was one of the most breathtaking moments I had ever seen. Sometimes for me, it may get stale seeing the T-Rex over and over and over, but that was just really freaking incredible. Which means my favorite dinosaur in the series is... the Mosasaurus. Okay, now really hear me out on this one. In my opinion, the Mosasaurus was used at the most perfect times. Just like Spinosaurus, it's only got 3 times when it appears. Remember that I consider Cooper's death, the plane getting ripped apart, and the fight as one appearance. But unlike Spiny, none of those moments felt wasteful. It has a great introductory scene with that Shamu type presentation, has a great spot in the middle of the film not only giving us a human death, which was one of the main things I was really excited about finding out how they were gonna end up using it in any action scenes, but showing a god equality and breaks a long-going Jurassic cliche by eating a woman, and finally flying out of the ocean at the end of the movie to take the killing blow on the Indominus and dragging her to Davy Jones's locker. So yeah, for me now, Mosey is at the top, followed by Spiny, then Rexy, then Indy. Just remember that I don't hate any of these dinos, and as I said all the way back in the JP3 review,
I gotta say, it's pretty impossible for me to hate a Jurassic Park movie.
Same with here. I certainly don't hate this movie either. It's got idiotic characters and decisions up the wall, but honestly, I think it's kind of to be expected at this point. Even the first movie has its share of dumb moments. As for rating it, good lord, dude, I don't even freaking know. Back on opening night, I gave it a 9 out of 10. Personally now, I'd say I give it a 7. But realistically, I think it's probably about a 5 or 6. So, you know, why don't we just say it's better than Lost World out of 10. But this film, much like the first and third films, had impact on my movie-going life. Seeing this trailer made me feel excited. A feeling I hadn't felt in a long time prior and is still a little hard to get me to feel. I'm a sucker for nostalgia. Chris Pratt really drove the movie for me. Even though some of the humor feels a little mistimed, I think him and Laurie are funny. The movie gave me what I wanted. New dinosaurs and creativity. I like that Henry Wu is back as a full-fleshed character and is starting to become a little bit more of an evil scientist. And there are heartwarming scenes that did make me tear up a bit. But I want to know what you all think about the film, the Indominus, and screw it, let's include the Mosasaurus. Whether or not you agree with my thoughts, I hope you all enjoyed this mega review, and I'll see you back here where we will erupt a lot more action, dinosaurs, and dumb decisions in the sequel. Catch you guys then. And on this day, no ACU or military beyond could defeat Mega Kecleon. The bullets had bounced and the bazooka failed to blast. The only solution was Mosey drowning her ass!
Shut up!